Chapter 6 of A Planned Deception by Constance Cumbey. Disarmament in the New World Order. Alice Bailey's Tibetan master told her disarmament would be the last of 9 steps towards the New World Order. In the preparatory period for the New World Order, there will be a steady and regulated disarmament. It will not be optional. No nation will be permitted to produce and organize any equipment for destructive purposes or to infringe the security of any other nation. One of the first tasks of any future peace conference will be to regulate this matter and gradually see to the disarming of the nations." Unquote. His motives become suspect, even frightening, however, when we see that the disarmament will merely transfer the weapons to those willing to use them for political and religious intimidation. Quote, "Its atomic bomb," meaning the atomic bomb, "its uses are twofold at this time. A, as the forerunner of that release of energy which will inaugurate the new age wherein we shall have a world culture. The atomic bomb emerged from a first-ray ashram working in conjunction with a fifth-ray group. From the long-range point of view, its intent was and is purely beneficent. B, as a means in the hands of the United Nations to enforce the outer forms of peace and thus give time for teaching on peace and on the growth of goodwill to take effect. The atomic bomb does not belong to the nations who perfected it. It belongs to the United Nations for use. Or let us rather hope simply for threatened use. When aggressive action on the part of any nation rears its ugly head, it does not essentially matter whether that aggression is the gesture of any particular nation or group of nations, or whether it is generated by the political groups of any powerful religious organization, such as the Church of Rome, who are as yet unable to leave politics alone." Unquote. The Apostle Paul warned, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Unquote. An international authority. Are the New Agers implementing this goal of Alice Bailey's Tibetan master? Are those seeking disarmament also seeking a transfer to an international agency? Are some of those in the disarmament movement being influenced either by the Alice Bailey teachings or by some who do follow them? This chapter will address some of those questions. The United Nations. Alice Bailey's continuing influence at the United Nations is easily visible. Robert Mueller and Donald Keyes are tremendously influential at the UN. As the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Mueller coordinates its vast 32-agency bureaucracy. He has quite openly participated in Lucis Trust activities, even giving speeches with titles such as "The Reappearance of the Christ" and "The New Group of World Servers, A Look into the Future." Likewise, Donald Keyes exercises no small degree of influence over that international body. With the help of his close friend Norman Cousins, he has formed close friendships with the UN ambassadors. Although the United Nations is tightly guarded, Donald Keyes has free access. He says often that he has started many a trend at the United Nations. As a gifted speechwriter, he composes speeches for UN ambassadors, humorously boasting about his impressive influence at the United Nations. Donald Keyes has told that Asheville Symposium audience how to start a trend. First, you write a speech for one ambassador, and then you write a speech for a second ambassador, praising the first ambassador for the speech he just gave. That's how you start a trend. Closing one's eyes, one can almost hear Daniel saying, "But he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries." In all fairness, the average peace demonstrator is not working with ulterior motives, but still they are saying peace and safety. Is there any evidence to show that the peace movement, too, has been influenced by the Lucis Trust and the New Age movement? Unfortunately, there is much. One of the most important disarmament groups is SANE, SANE. Donald Keyes helped organize and lead it. Familiar inside out with the Alice Bailey writings, Donald Keyes once worked for Lucius Trust as an arcane school administrator. His open contributions to that organization continue through his speeches and articles in their Beacon magazine. Another very important group of people in the Peace Network are the World Federalists. Donald Keyes represented them at the UN for many years. His influence continues there as well. In his Asheville speech, he proudly said that he had infiltrated the peace movement in 1958, the human rights movement in 1969, the global movement in 1970, and the ranks of diplomats in 1975. He said that he now spends his time writing speeches for foreign ministers and ambassadors and roaming the halls of the UN. Evidently, he spends time roaming the acres of Findhorn as well. He told the same audience about his annual workshops there. Keyes' impressive contacts with the United Nations are neither accidental nor coincidental. He told Lucius Trust just how they came about. Quote, Norman Cousins and I worked closely together with a number of the ambassadors. He would invite them to dinner, and I would suggest which ones he might invite. In this way, we had neutral turf where ambassadors could let down what hair they had and discuss issues which were close to their hearts, which they might not normally undertake to reveal to one another. Out of that came their idea of a conference on human survival, which would meet at the 25th anniversary of the United Nations. Unquote. World Goodwill, a division of Lucius Trust, works very hard at keeping track of the peace movement. One major catalog on the disarmament movement. In fact, the only one I have found mass-marketed in major bookstores gives World Goodwill's transition activities frequent credit. Under normal circumstances, very few, if indeed any individuals, could quarrel with the need to remove nuclear tensions from the world. Undoubtedly, it has substantially contributed to the stress and anxiety of modern living and caused men's hearts to fail for fear of looking after those things coming upon the earth. However, as the excerpts above show, the Bailey Tibetan plans did not stop with mere disarmament. There was much more to the plan, as shown. Occult initiates plugged into the plan also believe those nuclear weapons must be put in the hands of an international authority, the United Nations, or an equivalent agency. Is the New Age movement and the New Age influenced disarmament movement seeking such an international authority, or are they merely talking about disposing of armaments? The American Movement for World Government. There is a movement with goals identical to Alice Bailey's Tibetan. Moreover, it has some very familiar New Age names on its masthead, called the American Movement for World Government. It says a world authority must control all nuclear weapons and materials and destroy all the nuclear weapons in the world. Among the advisory board in the matter are American Humanist Association President Isaac Asimov, also planetary citizens, Albert Zent Georgi, David Browder, president of Friends of the Earth, and Paul Ehrlich, a member of the Club of Rome. They happily said there was an international police as seen in Lebanon, but they feel that is not enough. They continue. But clearly it cannot function effectively for permanent peacekeeping if its presence depends on consent of the combatants. Quote, it needs authority to keep it in being and in place. It needs unified international control, unquote. This sounds ominously like Donald Keyes' declaration to that November 1984 North Carolina symposium. Quote, don't let anyone think for a moment that you can run a planet without a head, unquote. The group's full-page advertisement appeared in several papers, including the Berkshire Eagle on Friday, April 8, 1983. It also said international support for this was mounting. Quote, America and Russia have sustained such losses in world leadership, mostly through their own follies and mistakes, that the proposal for world peace institutions needs to come from powers that cannot be accused of imperialist ambitions. That's where it is coming from right now today. The Scandinavian countries almost certainly even now stand ready to propose a world constitutional assembly. They could be joined immediately by West Germany, Mexico, Japan, probably Canada, India, where there is a bill in Parliament for it right now. Sri Lanka, France, Italy, and many others. At least 5 of these nations have appropriated money to study the problems of world authority. A protective world government could be created faster than half-hearted haggling, warhead-counting disarmament treaties which have never yet endured or prevented war. A world constitutional assembly could be convened within a few months, say in Athens, where democratic government first began. With the world watching and pushing, a constitution could be ready in 6 months. Ratification could take only a preponderant majority of nations in less than a year. The Bible prophesied it, and indeed, someday it will happen. But when it comes, it will not be a peaceful solution. Both Bible prophecy and the Tibetans' boastings tell us it will be instead a final solution. And that is the end of chapter 6. I think it's very interesting to see really just how influential the New Age movement is. In case you weren't aware, then, a lot of people think it's just a goofy kind of different type of spirituality, but it's really much more than that. So here's the chapter notes. And I will leave a link below. The next chapter is chapter 7 of Rainbows and Unicorns. So I had previously done a video on this chapter. I will include it in the playlist for this book. Thanks for watching and listening.
Run.
There's just one name that can keep you out of hell, and it's the name of Jesus. The name of Jesus.